Troy, you want to tell us a little bit about what life was growing up for you as a kid and how he brought you to the point that you're out there with Ghetto Ministries and sharing what God's done for you. Tell us a little bit about what life was like.
Well, I grew up, in the drug environment at a very young age, got introduced to drugs, and we grew up around domestic violence and crime. And growing up thinking that's all there was to life. I didn't see nothing else. I thought that was normal. So, you would think watching what drugs can do to a family would turn you away from it, but instead I ran towards it. I started using at a very young age, got involved in crime at a very young age, was in and out of jail my whole youth. And, after I had my son, I really wanted to get out of it, and I tried to, but of course addiction, had a hold of me. I used meth for 6 years, and I tried every drug there is to try. I was really in the drug scene and was selling drugs, so it was always around. And so trying to leave that was extremely difficult, which led to ultimately me losing my son and getting away from the family life, and that really ate me up even more. And so got into the drug scene even harder, and it got to the point where drugs took everything from me. I was homeless, had nothing but the clothes on my back and the gun in my pocket, and I was extremely malnourished. I weighed about 136 pounds, and I just had nothing. And what really led me to God is, I never felt remorse for any of the things I did. I stole a lot and committed a lot of crimes, and it was just normal for me. I thought that's who I was.
It's your life.
Yeah. So I never felt remorse for it until one day, I'm walking. It was in the middle of the night. I had nowhere to go. It was really cold. And out of nowhere, and I know it was God now, but I immediately had a conviction and just a conscience about everything I'd ever done in my life. It just hit me all at once. I started thinking about all the bad I've done and just how bad of a person I was. And it began to make me think about all the times God had saved my life, which I never had anything to do with God. As far as God came, there was a God and there was a devil, and I was going to hell, and that's as much as I knew. And but I really started to think about all the times I should have died, even the times I did die and came back. And my first thought of God in my life was hatred. I hated God for keeping me alive just to do all this bad. And I really didn't understand why he was keeping me alive, why I lived so long, why I had a kid just to really ruin his life as well. And I told myself that night, if God's not going to take my life, I'm going to take it. And I went out to the middle of nowhere, put the gun to my head, and was ready to kill myself. And I can't explain it at the time. I was out in the middle of nowhere, so nobody could see what I was about to do. And I went to pull the trigger, and I just felt this heavy presence of somebody staring at me, just watching me. And it really creeped me out. And so I put the gun down, I looked around, I knew there was nobody out there. And I came to realize later it was God. It was God staring at me, telling me, I'm not done with you,
Wow.
And a couple, maybe 2-3 weeks after that, I was incarcerated. And I was sitting there in a cell, and that was normal. I was in and out of jail my whole life. And what happened was a pastor walked by in my cell and asked me if I knew who Jesus Christ was. And I told him, yeah, I know who Jesus is. And he told me, no, you don't. If you knew who Jesus was, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. And he began to just tell me simple things about God, things I'd never heard before. And what really struck me was how I knew nothing about God. There was nothing I knew about God. I didn't know how he worked. I didn't know who he was. And he handed me a Bible. And, the first page of those prison Bibles, it has the sinner's prayer. And I read it in my mind. And I don't know what made me do it. Maybe because I had nothing left to lose or whatever. But I ended up reading that out loud and meaning it with all my heart. And after that, I just got in that Bible nonstop. The whole time I was incarcerated, I was just reading. I read 50 books out of the Bible while I was in there, and it completely transformed everything about my life.
Yeah. Well, what's significant, I think, is that when you're at that point and you have that gun in your hand, but God had revealed to you, and all of us need to be able to come forward and admit that we are sinful, because there's no degree of sin. I'm sure the things you were doing were terrible and all that, But a kid lying is sin. And so we have that sinful nature. And so with God, that sin just separates us from him. And so, yes, you may not have known him then, but he was there. He's always there for us. But, you know, you came to that acknowledgement. That's the first step, to recognize that we're a sinner. And then God starts to move once we recognize, once we admit it, because, you know, you go through a period of time where you're sinning and you don't even realize that. That's a pretty dangerous place, because you're just going on. But at some point, if a person recognizes that they are sinning, then, you know, then God's ready to move in and say, hey, I died for your sins. I can come into your heart. I can change you. And that's what's awesome. And I do believe you're right. I mean, he had to be there to change your mind, you know, because as you said, you were at that point in life where you just don't want to continue any longer. And another thing that as I was listening to you share that, Troy, is that you said that you had gone on with this long life. Well, you're not very, how old are you?
I'm only 24.
The way you describe it is like you've been 40 years in the desert. But for you, it was 40 years. And you were out there. You were wandering. And that kind of lifestyle can make somebody very old in a short period of time. And in this world that we live in, and I know that there's people that are listening today, and they may be going through this, and you know, sin is fun, but it's fun for a season, and it's what happens to you as you're doing these things, and before you know it, even the fun leaves, and you're into a terrible lifestyle that can just lead you to, you know, where you don't care about anybody, yourself, and all kinds of circumstances occur, and there are consequences for sin, and you were facing those. And so as you got to that point and you began reading the Bibles there as you were incarcerated, how did God get to the point that you were, where did Ghetto Ministries come from?
Oh, well, it was almost instantly. I mean, I was in there and I was reading, I was also reading a book by Rick Warren, The Purpose-Driven Life, What on Earth Am I Here For? And that gave me so much information on what I was meant to do now that I knew God and was following God. And so almost instantly the ministry started up. Right there inside the jail cell, I started a Bible study. You know, after I read most of the Bible, I really felt like God was telling me to start a Bible study right then and there. So we started right there in our cell every morning. We would get together and just read the Bible. And
when you started, how many guys were?
Oh man, there was about 5 or 6 people that would join every morning, and really, it was. What amazed me is how easily it was for the information to come out of my mouth. Like, you know, I just barely started following God, but it seems like He was just giving me so much knowledge about Him that I didn't even know on my own. There's no way I could have. And it was just amazing, and I really felt a passion for the Bible studies. And that's really where Bible study in the ghetto started, was right there behind bars. And when I got out, you know, of course, I got involved in the church, got baptized, and He completely restored everything. I had nothing when I got out. Now I have my family back. I have a good job. I got a house. I'm involved in great ministry. I'm a church leader. I mean, He just restored everything.
Yeah.
And
that's really the reality of Jesus Christ, isn't it, Troy?
Yeah.
I mean, so when you were describing these things, where were you living at the time?
I was living in Hobbs.
You were there?
Yes, I was actually locked up in Texas.
Oh, okay.
And so when I got out, I went back to Hobbs with nothing.
Wherever you were doing your thing, it was all over the place, I'm sure. I know I went through a similar circumstance involved in drugs, and God delivered me out of that. And sometimes you're not even sure where you're at. So, but the reason I say that is because the great thing that God does when people have come out of it, those people that saw you doing the things that you were doing back then and now see what God has done. Oh, yeah. He uses that to be able to touch lives, doesn't He?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so what a blessing for Him to give you your family back.
Oh, yeah.
You're working. You're doing what God has called you to do, and you have a long life in front of you, because I'm sure God's going to use that mightily. Tell us about some of the things. We're going to go back and let's talk a little bit about Meta Outreach, and we'll come back to some of the things you're doing at Ghetto Ministry.